I'm Bruce. I am a dad, an art teacher, and a panel member. And myself and my partner Cian adopted with St David's about 10 years ago. I'd wanted to start a family for a long, long time, and Cian was always very reticent about it. And I think he was right, because we weren't really at that point in our lives where I think adoption was really right for us. I think we were still kind of not particularly adult enough to be parents, and it was weird when one summer a friend of ours had a baby, and it was like a little switch in Cian's head, and he just suddenly decided, oh, Daisy's been born, I want this, and from that moment we kind of just decided, yeah, we're going to look into it. We started doing a little bit of research online. We quickly came across St David's and phoned. So we didn't really speak to many other people. It was St David's. They seemed very, I don't know, the ethos and everything was kind of, it felt right for us. So we made that call. This was 10 years ago, so I think it's a lot more prevalent now. But I think for a lot of adoption agencies and a lot of local authorities, maybe it was still quite new, and so we were worried, because as gay men who've experienced prejudice, especially in school. We grew up during the times of Section 28, and it's a worry about what other people are going to think and about how other people are going to treat you, and whether actually you're going to be treated fairly in terms of adoption, because there are still a lot of kind of, the only word for it is bigoted views that same-sex families are wrong. And, we didn't want to come across any of that, so, that is a worry, that is a thought, that possibly adoption agencies had that. So from the get-go, we put at ease about those worries by St David's. We didn't at one point feel that our family setup would be seen as anything other than anybody else's. We were happy that actually everybody that we met and everybody that we spoke to and every experience that we had through St David's was a very positive, nurturing one, and that we realised very early on through the people that we talked to that St David's were on our side and wanted us to become a family, and wanted us to go through that process and learn about ourselves and learn about how we would parent. Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, it was terrifying when somebody's coming to your house to talk to you about the possibility of becoming a family, and you do think, oh, I've got to be on my best behaviour. We can't, everything's got to be perfect. There can't be a speck of dust anywhere, and which is ridiculous, really. Nobody's that judgmental, certainly not in our experience with St David's. But the preparation training was. I mean, that was a daunting thing to go on, because we literally had no idea what to expect. As it was, I think, so valuable. We had a wonderful social worker called Mary who did our training with us, and she was just incredible. And it was 3 days of a roller coaster of emotions. More often than not, there were tears. There was a lot of laughter, but it was. So as a teacher, I found quite a lot of it quite moving, and it actually changed a lot of the ways that I approached certain children that I come across in the classroom, because some of the things that she told us about how trauma and early kind of those sorts of things that happen to children who are going to be adopted, those experiences they've had and how that comes out in their behaviour, and that's the reason they do it. I mean, the one that really struck me was that children who come from physically abusive families where there's violence, that they will very often not look you in the eye. And I think a lot of teachers will say to children, "Look at me when you," without even thinking about it. Look at me when I'm talking to you, and it's those sorts of things that kind of really get you, because you think, "Oh, I didn't even think of that. Why didn't I think of that? I should have thought of that," you know. And so, the way that she spoke to us about children's behaviour and what they've been through was incredibly empowering, because she used to have this toolbox analogy that she would say, you know, these 3 days are going to be really full on, because you're going to have all of these, you're going to hear about all of these different behaviours and experiences, but you're not going to experience all of that when you adopt. You know, not a child that you adopt is not going to show all of this that we've talked about. But what she was saying was that you will have the tools in that toolbox just to take out what you need. And it was she was just incredible. So that prep training was just, like I said, I felt it was empowering, because it kind of set you up to understand, you know, these are the sorts of things that you can expect, but these are the sorts of ways that you can kind of get through that as a family and work through those kind of issues, behaviours. Not really issues, but you know. I found it quite easy to switch off the teacher side of me when I was thinking about becoming a parent. And so in the prep training, I was thinking about kind of children that I knew had previous trauma, but at the same time, it was always at the absolute forefront of my mind that I'm preparing for something totally different, and going and standing in front of a class of 30 children and doing all that juggling is a totally different experience than standing in front of maybe one child and juggling all of that. You know, I don't think I've ever found it difficult to switch between being a parent and being a teacher. Sometimes the teacher stare comes in very handy at home. Haven't had to use it very much. We did the preparation training, and after the preparation training, we could have put the application in straight away, but we wanted to move. So at the time we were renting, and I know that wouldn't have been a problem, but we wanted, we felt it was a time where we should have our own, we should be established to have our own house. And I think we talked about it and decided that if we went through adoption while we were renting, that we would probably be renting for a long time, because a move after adoption would be impossible for a good couple of years. So we wanted to get that done. So we were saving up for a house. We rather naively did this whole time frame in our heads that the assessment at the time would be 8 months, so that we would be able to buy a house at this point, so we could put the application in at this point. Luckily, it all worked out, but I think people thought we were nuts, because they were saying, you do realise it takes a little bit longer to buy a house and for it all to go through. But yeah, so we put off the application so that we could get a deposit together for a house, and then we made a start kind of I think it was about 6 months after preparation. Yeah, St David's absolutely gave us the space to kind of to do what was right for us. I mean, between the first phone call that we made and our application going in was a year, you know, and at no point did we feel pressurized that we had to do that any quicker. You know, we stepped away not because we were worried about anything or because we didn't want to do it or we were having second thoughts, but it was purely because we wanted to be in that kind of solid situation where we had our own house, that we could not have to worry about that when we had a child who was trying to settle, and you know, and not thinking about we need to move in the future and when's it best to do that. We just wanted to be somewhere where, and actually it worked out brilliantly because we ended up buying right next to a park, so you know, perfect. Amazing. I mean, it's really weird, isn't it, when you think about serendipity and all of that sort of stuff. We would never have met our son if we'd put the application in straight after And that really blows my mind a little bit, you know. It makes me feel a bit emotional about that. But yeah, no, we never thought, oh, this is gonna stop us. We knew it had to be right. You can't rush into it. You can't. Yeah, you might want a family, but it has to be at the right time. It has to be the right time for you as a couple. It has to be. You have to be in the right place, kind of emotionally, financially. All of those things have to be kind of right before you do it. It's because that process is not an easy process. It's not. I mean, St. David's make it as easy as possible, but it's emotional. It's draining. It's tiring. It takes a lot out of you. And if you're not in the right headspace for that, you know, that can kind of mess with your brain a little bit, I think, you know. So I think you've got to be ready. There is a lifestyle change. And, you know, we certainly enjoyed going out for food and socializing with friends. I mean, at that stage in our life, we weren't doing it as much as we did in our 20s, because you just get too tired. And so it wasn't too much of a wrench, really, to not have that anymore. But you do have to, yeah, we had to come to that realization that life is going to change big style. We're not going to be able to just drop everything and say, oh, should we meet after work and go out and have dinner? And, you know, that's not going to happen. But if I'm honest, we were already at that stage where that wasn't an important thing anyway. The things that we were doing that were important were the things that actually we can still do now, and we still did when our son was a lot younger. So it wasn't too much of a wrench. Yeah, and I think that was the thing, and I think that's what Kian was always really aware of, and was always telling me to just chill out a bit. Is that we were enjoying that part of life, and there's no harm in that. You know, that's part of kind of being a young adult, I suppose, isn't it? Is having those experiences and doing those things. And when you get to a certain age, you realise that there are other things that are more important to you, and that you maybe have done all of that, and you're happy, and you don't really need it that strongly, and not to kind of be so prevalent in your life that yeah, but it is about that, finding that time. It's like, you know, if your life is all about going out and partying, it's not the right time. Neither one of us really knew many people who were social workers. We didn't have friends who were social workers. We'd met social workers, obviously, at the prep training, but we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know what to expect from the assessment. We'd had a little bit from the prep training of what that would look like on paper, but that's very different from it actually happening in your house. You know, a social worker coming to your house. And I suppose at the forefront of your mind is that idea that that person is there to judge you, you know, which they kind of are. But it came out that it was in a more of a supportive way than we were thinking. And so, you know, it is a really terrifying first meeting, I think, you know, knowing that the social worker who is literally going to do your assessment and decide whether or not you are suitable and capable of being parents. I mean, that's a huge thing, that first visit, isn't it? You know, it's massive. I can always remember the first time Mel visited us, and we were sitting in our living room, and we were kind of in a triangle shape, and Mel was talking to Kian, and as Kian was talking, he had decided to wear this vest and this little cardigan, and as he was speaking to Mel, and I'm looking at him because obviously he's, you know, talking. At that moment, his cardigan fell to this side and his vest fell to this side, exposing to the social worker who is going to decide on our future life, exposing his pierced nipple. And And he hadn't noticed. I'm not sure Mel had, but if she had, she was very, very professional about it. But I certainly had noticed. And I am frantically, with my eyes, gesturing to Cian about his pierced nipple being flashed to the social worker. He was oblivious. And I honestly, when Mel left, I was devastated because I thought that was going to jeopardise. I mean, that was a ridiculous thing to think, wasn't it, really, that a pierced nipple was going to jeopardise your future as an adoptive parent. But I was devastated, because I honestly thought we'd screwed it all up. So the assessment process was quite, I want to use the word intrusive, but I don't want to use the word intrusive in a negative way. It has to be intrusive. They have to talk to you about a lot of very personal stuff, and it should be that way. But it was a really good experience. Like, people look at me strange when I say that, that I use the word intrusive, but I say that it was a good experience. It really, that whole process really gets you thinking about your capability as a parent and what sorts of things you're going to do as a parent. How are you going to deal with this X, Y, and Z situation that might arise, and then talking about it was like free therapy at one point. There was I mean, you have a private one-on-one session with a social worker where you talk about your childhood and all those things that have built up to make you. And I remember I only had the one session. I felt like I was quite a boring person because Cian had two. I think he was using it as free therapy. But those sorts of things that's really interesting, I think, to actually sit down and reflect on your childhood and your experiences in school and as an early adult, and to reflect on that and think about how that has formed you into the person that you are, but also how that's going to inform you as a parent. And so that assessment process, while it is kind of, I suppose it is in some sense a judgment, it's also an extension of that prep training, because you are exploring kind of scenarios, you're exploring certain things that might happen, and you're exploring what your reaction to that would be, and thinking about possibly, if you have a certain idea of how to deal with that, is that actually the best way of sorting that out. So it's kind of an extension of training, really, I suppose, as well as a judgment and the social worker getting to know you. And I think, you very quickly build up a very strong relationship with anybody that comes into your house and asks you those sorts of questions. You can't not, really, And I think what was brilliant about Mel was the way that she just made that such an easy process of kind of that strong relationship, and that she made it very clear that it was important to be as open as possible. And I think not being open, I think it's impossible in that assessment process. You can't kind of park things. You have to bring everything out and lay it all out and examine it all. And it's about that. It's about being reflective. It's about thinking, well, what did that do to me? What effect did that have on me as a person, and what effect is that going to have on me as a parent? And do I need to check myself and think about that in future? And do I need to kind of tweak that and think, well, because I experienced that, am I going to behave in that way if I'm faced with this? I was absolutely terrified going to panel. And it was abject fear. I've never experienced anything like it. And it was irrational, totally irrational fear, because Mel had done everything and said all the right things to kind of tell us this is not a massive thing. Those people are there to support you. It's not a huge problem. You know, it's fine. Everything's going to be fine. I was terrified. I think I was physically shaking. And I can remember, I remember walking into that panel and everybody looked so serious. And there was one person, I remember one person smiling. And I just locked onto that person. And because I was terrified of these people, and I just thought, because it's such a huge thing, isn't it? You know, these are people who you see as being an obstacle or something you have to get past. They're going to decide whether you have this life that you've been dreaming of for however long, and you know, they're all very serious because it's a serious thing, you know. So they're not going to be all jolly, and you know, they're thinking and they're waiting to see what you say. But I can remember being terrified of them all, apart from one with a smile on her face. But even she was terrifying, and it was over so quick, because it's actually really, I mean, as a panel member now, I can look back and I understand the reason that you're present at panel is because you know, the panel members have read your report, but that's just paper, and really you need to meet the applicants. So the panel needed to meet us so they could get a sense of who we are as people. And I get that now. At the time, it was just such a terrifying thing. And again, it was you know, little things that you do that you think, oh my God, did that make me look like an absolute idiot? I can remember and I still do it now when I talk about this is why I'm hoping I'm not going to do it now. When I talk about this particular question, I still well up now. And when I'm on panel, a lot of the time when applicants are asked this same question, because the question always comes up every panel, I will still have to bite my cheek because I can feel myself welling up. And it's that last question of, what are you most looking forward to about being an adoptive parent? And it just came out of nowhere, this emotion, and I don't know, I wasn't feeling it. I was absolutely fine because I was too busy being scared to feel anything else. And they asked me that question, and they just couldn't get through that answer without my voice cracking and the tears coming. And I can remember sitting there thinking, they're going to think you're a right knob, don't do this. But I mean, I suppose it shows that you're human, doesn't it? But it was the one question that just, you know, how do you answer that question? How do you answer that question and not get emotional? How do you listen to another person when you know how important this is to them? How do you listen to that person answer that question without getting emotional? And as a panel member, I'm really aware I've got to be professional. I can't be sitting in the corner, a snotty mess, you know, listening to somebody else answer that question. But I cannot listen to somebody talk about that without feeling emotion, because it's so important to them. I think I'm a very empathetic person anyway, but the empathy that you feel for that couple, because you know the terror when they first walk through that door and they set eyes on you. They know, you know what they're feeling. You know the fear, and it is irrational, because you know that their social workers have told them this is nothing. It's nothing to worry about. It's so that the panel can get a sense of who you are. They're not judging you as people. Whatever you say in these questions, they're not judging you. They've already done that because they've read the PAR. It doesn't matter how many times you get told that, you know the fear. And so I think as a panel member, when people walk in, you can see the fear on their faces. And I can always remember that one smiley face. So I must look like an idiot. I must look insane because I plaster this smile on my face. And I'm just really aware that you have to look kind of not comforting, but you have to look welcoming and open and smiley, because they are absolutely crapping themselves. So yeah, it is a weird thing as a panel member to sit and have to listen to those sorts of things, knowing what you felt at that time. When we left panel, I can vividly remember everything, because we jumped in a taxi And we were just so amped up with adrenaline still. We were still kind of, oh my God, we've just done this, and it was terrifying and wonderful, and we're waiting to find out. And we decided that we were going to go to Chapter and have some food, because we couldn't go home. We just couldn't go home and just sit down and be chill. We just needed to be somewhere where there were lots of people and there was noise. And I remember we got on the way, so we were in the taxi on the way back from St David's to Chapter, and we got a phone call from Mel, and Mel told us that we'd been approved. And I can remember going to Chapter, and it must have looked like we were a couple who were splitting up, because we were sitting there having a conversation, and then randomly one of us would just burst into tears. And then we would carry on with the conversation, and then the other one would burst into tears. And it must have looked like we were having this huge kind of emotional breakup, when in actual fact it was literally just the adrenaline leaving and that emotion just pouring out. And I remember sitting there with a smile on my face and tears in my eyes, and just, this is stupid. Why am I still crying about this? You know, and I think it was just relief, just because there was so much before that had built up to that, and then you're approved, and it's just like relief. And it isn't until a day or two later that you realise there's a lot more to come. You know, that's not it. But it was a brilliant feeling. It was brilliant. It was a month. It was a month between approval and Mel approaching us with a match, and it was. It was lucky for us, I think, in a way, because we went to panel at the beginning of December, and so it was Christmas. Everything, shut down. There was nothing. So there was nothing that we could think about or worry about. It was just nobody was going to come to us with anything, and we thought, a couple of months now into the new year, Mel will call us, and it was literally the first week of January, and Mel came to us, and she said, "We've got 2 possible matches." She said that the one that's strongest for you, we think, is a little boy, and that was the little boy we ended up adopting. So it felt very quick, and then from that moment, from that first, when she approached us and said, "These are the basic details. Is this something that you'd be interested in kind of going further with?" It was a big yes. So that then it was like a stone rolling down a hill that you can't possibly stop. And we could have at any point. Mel made it very clear that if at any point we were uncomfortable about any of the information that we found out, and that we didn't think it was right for us, that we could stop it. But just that momentum built up, and it was, we were meeting the child social worker, and they were coming to the house and talking to us about the child that possibly could be our son, and giving us the details. And then we were meeting their medical advisor, and then we were meeting the foster carers, and then we were doing this, and and it was just boom, 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 and I think it was that all happened between January and March. And I know for a lot of people, and this is the thing, whenever I've spoken at prep training about our journey, I've always said to people about how at our prep training, somebody said, there was a lady that came to speak to us, and she said that it took her a long time to feel love for the child that they adopted. And I can remember stopping at that point and thinking, oh my God, I'd find that really hard. And how actually when it was us, that was totally different, and we fell in love completely and utterly from the first moment we saw a picture, and it's just how different everybody's journey is. And so I suppose the fact that ours was quite quick, not everybody I know has that, and some people have a lot of a longer process, but it felt so quick, everything happening, all these people that we were meeting, and it was a really important kind of process for us, because it was important for us to really get a sense of who this child was and whether we felt capable of supporting them with whatever trauma they'd experienced in their early life, because if we weren't the right people for that, it wouldn't work. And so we had to be sure that we had those tools that Mary had given us, that we were comfortable with taking those out and using those, When we were in the assessment process, Cian and I couldn't agree on boy or girl. And at the time, I was very adamant that we were going to have a girl, and Cian wanted a little boy. And I can remember turning to Cian and saying, look, if we have a little boy, what if that little boy plays rugby? Neither of us are sporty. Can you seriously see us on a Sunday afternoon or morning in the rain on a rugby pitch trying to understand the rules of what is in front of us? And that's exactly what we got. Our son was into rugby, ice hockey, swimming, football. For a couple that had zero interest in any sport, we watched a little bit of the Olympics. We had a child who is the sportiest child you could possibly imagine, and into everything. And that is, I think, the biggest change in our lives. I'm a season ticket holder for the Cardiff Devils now. Who would have thought that 10 years ago? I mean, I'd never even watched an ice hockey game on the television. It never even crossed my mind. And now my son plays for the Junior Devils, and I have a season ticket for the Cardiff Devils, and I go and I scream and I jump up when they score. And that is the weirdest. If 10 years ago me thought that was what's going to happen, nah. It's not. It's weird. It's weird. That first year was just a year full of firsts, and it was little tiny things that I hadn't even considered as that he might not have done. So as simple as the fact that, I mean, it was a wonderful. I had a wonderful adoption leave, and I feel really blessed that I could do it, and I feel really bad for Cian that he had to go back to work, but it was, he came to us in April, and he started in nursery kind of, I think, possibly June, and he was in the morning nursery, and so I would pick him up at lunchtime, and we'd have these summer afternoons, because actually it was quite a nice summer that year, and we had these wonderful afternoons where we just go to the park, and he'd never had a picnic before, and sitting on a blanket and eating strawberries was this amazing experience for him. And he'd never stood on the beach when the tide was coming in and your feet sink into the sand. He'd never experienced that. He never felt that, and his glee at that. And we had to stand there for about half an hour just doing that, those things that you don't even consider that might not have happened, and it is, and it's an emotional thing. It's an emotional thing. It's I suppose it's emotional because you feel sad that a child could get to 4 years old and not experience that, but also that you feel totally blessed that you get to experience that for the first time. You get to experience their first ever ride on a train, it's magical. And I think this is something that with introductions you're not totally aware of. You're told about it, but you kind of don't really realize how exhausting it is, because not only are you kind of going to be emotionally drained, but quite often you're doing a lot of traveling, and we traveled a long way, and so your brain does all sorts of things when you're on your way to meet your child. It's weird, isn't it? It's just weird. Saying that is weird. So it feels just, you're having almost like an out of body experience, that that when you reach your destination, that is at the end of there is your child, is the person that's going to be in your family for the rest of your life. And yeah, it was bonkers. And then we turned up at the house, and I remember, I can remember this vividly. They had a glass door, and there was a long passageway, and then that turned into the kitchen. And we stood at the door, and I think we both just spent a moment just taking a breath, because this was a momentous thing. It was terrifying. And we knocked on the door, and this little head peeped round the corner from the kitchen, giggled, screamed, and ran away. And it was just, it was exactly what you wanted. You know, you wanted that, because from the moment that we saw him do that, we got a sense of this excitement. And obviously there's going to be a lot of kind of, from him, fear under that as well, because it's the fear of the unknown, but there was excitement there as well. And it was just, that was a wonderful moment. It was I loved it. I was still scared. And we had an hour. That was it. It was just that first meeting was an hour. And it was like being in a goldfish bowl, because it was the most unnatural thing, because we were sat on the sofa chatting and doing things with him whilst being watched by foster carers, our social worker, his social worker. And it was a strange old thing, wonderful, but just I can't explain how that feels, that moment, but the whole time being observed is weird. But then it just, developed from there, that we went for longer periods of time. We started taking over just the day-to-day things like cooking lunch or doing bath times and bedtime stories finally. But I can remember that the first time he came to our house, because kind of halfway through introductions it flipped, and he was starting to come to the house and spend some time with us. And in the video that we'd made, I'd found this beautiful book called Penguin and Pinecone. I loved the book. And we'd done this thing in the video where he'd had this, we bought this teddy for him that we were going to give to him on the first day. And it was a little monkey, and we'd asked him to name the monkey in the grown-up family book. And part of the video was that Monkey was lying in his bed, and we were sat reading Penguin and Pinecone to him. And we got halfway through the story, and we said, Monkey's fallen asleep. We're going to stop there, and we'll finish that when you come to us the first time. And I can remember he came to us that first day, and he sat on the sofa with Kian. And Kian got Penguin and Pinecone out, and he was so excited because he had watched this video so many times. And he sat on that sofa, and for the first part of that story, which we'd read in the video, he knew every single word, and he even did the same Scottish accent that Penguin had that I had done. So he was going knit one, purl one, and it was just incredible. It was that, and I can still see them sitting on the sofa reading that book, and it just is one of the most abiding, wonderful memories that I have of that time. It's sorry.
Yeah, I'm gone. Yeah, I was going to say, apologise. We have to apologise.
Yes, when I was first approached to be a panel member, my initial thought was, why would they ask me? Why on earth would they ask me to do that? But I do get it. You need a real kind of cross section of people on panel, lots of different kind of where they're coming from is a different place, and I think when I was approached, I was asked, obviously because I'm an adopter, but also I think because I have so much experience in education. I think they wanted to bring that extra aspect as well to it. So once I did that initial kind of thought of why me, I did kind of understand then. I mean, that's not to say that I didn't spend the first year of panel feeling a very strong imposter syndrome. But yeah, I felt really honoured actually to be asked. I would always say, and this sounds so naff and cliche, but I would always say that I would do anything for St David's. If St David's need me to do something and they email to say, look, please can you do this for us, I would do it, because I just feel as a family, we've had so much from them. We've had so much support from them that I will freely give that back. And being a panel member is such a huge, important part of the process, and so being asked, being considered to be somebody that could do that and actually do a good job of it is a huge honour, you know. So once I got over the why me's, it was a really warm feeling of, wow, you know, this is quite something to be asked to do this. Yeah, I think there's a few things that I have a unique perspective of. I think being an adopter, and I think that's the most. I think that's the most important thing that I bring, is that I understand where they're coming from when they come into panel, you know, and but also, yeah, I think having that understanding of education and how important it is for adopters to work closely with schools, particularly because a lot of children that are adopted will have additional needs that parents need to advocate for, and unfortunately there are some schools that aren't great at providing that naturally. So, you know, so I think I think I bring that element, but also as a same-sex adopter, I think, you know, there's often the question asked in the PAR about diversity and about opinions about LGBTQ plus people and what if a child was too, and it can seem like quite an unimportant question because it's, you know, it's so far in the future and it's just a what if. But I feel as somebody that knows what it's like to have those feelings and those experiences and need the correct support, I think I will always question if I don't feel that sort of thing has been addressed enough. I will always question that, because I think it's really important for us to know that if a child is placed with you and they do grow up and they're gay or you know, that you're going to still be supporting them in the same way. So I think that also, and I think St David's is brilliant because there are so many same-sex couples that are being assessed and provide this wonderful family. And I just think, you know, I've had that experience, so I think that's an important thing that I bring to panel. Going into that panel, we knew that really, if there had been any major problems, that would have been flagged up a long time ago. And if St David's were worried about us adopting, they probably wouldn't have carried on with the assessment. So we knew that. We knew going into panel that really, you know, there wasn't anything for us to worry about. But this is a huge thing for you. It's a huge part of your life that is hanging. It feels like, even though it's not really, it feels like it's hanging in the balance. And so, of course, you're going to be daunted, and of course, you're going to be terrified, and of course, you're probably going to be physically shaking. And there's nothing anyone can say or do that will lessen that, you know, because it means the world. But it's important to hear that message. It's really important to hear the message of don't worry, it's not a big deal, because you do need that. But your adrenaline's going to kick in, and you're going to feel that fear no matter what.
So what advice would you give an applicant going to panel, Bruce?
Don't worry. My favourite thing is meeting the applicants, and that sounds really cliche, but that last question, because I am an emotional person, that hearing that, I think because people are so vastly different, aren't they? You know, and applicants are so vastly different, and everybody, you know, it's so interesting reading a report because everybody has had such a diversity of life experiences that have brought them to this moment, and just reading those reports and thinking how all of those things that have come together, how they've ended up with this person being right for adoption, and you can see, oh, that thing's going to make them wonderful as a parent, and that thing, oh, that child's going to be so lucky to have that experience. I love that. And then I love then when they come in and you just hear that range of answers to that last question, what are you most looking forward to? I love hearing those answers because people just come at it from such different perspectives. Just that total difference, I think, in what's going to be in front of you in terms of a report and the actual applicants. I love it. I love that diversity of people that are coming through the doors. I think it's wonderful. Oh, the feeling you get going home after panel, after you've approved, and you know what's coming, and you know, God, they're going to be exhausted, but you know the joy that they're going to get at the end of that is just such a wonderful feeling, just knowing that you've had a tiny little part in that. The important message is that everybody around that table wants this for you. That everybody who's sitting there wants a child to have a wonderful family life with you, and so we're not there to trip you up or to kind of prove that you're wrong in some way or that you've said something wrong or done something wrong. We want this to work as much as you do. I think that's the important message to give applicants. You know, everybody around that table wants it for you.
Done.
Can I go home now then?
You can't.